Back in 2017, Google researchers introduced transformers, which was kind of a game changer, by the way. Not long after that, there was another breakthrough in transfer learning, which showed us that we can create top-notch models even with limited labeled data. This was when NLP really had its aha moment through unsupervised learning. These two developments paved the way for the most well-known transformers today, GPT and BERT. And thanks to them, we no longer need to train the task-specific architecture from the scratch. And since then, a whole zoo of transformer models has emerged. In this video, we're going to look into attention and transfer learning. And in the bonus section, I will talk about one specific network architecture that was quite popular before transformers came along. Let's start discussing sequence models. What are sequence models? In sequence models, both input and outputs are sequences, and these sequences can be of any length. And here is many to one sequence, wherein model takes movie reviews one word at a time and outputs a sentiment or mood of that reviewer. You can think of one-to-many as image capturing system, where model takes in an image as an input and outputs a caption that is appropriate for that image. Here we have many-to-many. Many-to-many is a machine translation system where we translate languages. English to German, for example. Model takes input languages sequentially and outputs in another language word by word. Let's focus more on machine translation system and see what's under the hood. So how does this work? In this example, we are translating English sentence "Transformers are great" to German "Transformers sind großartig." To do this, we have encoder block and the decoder block. The encoder job is to take the input sequences and encode into a numerical representation, often referred as context vector. And this state is then passed to the decoder, which generates the output sequentially, essentially translating the input language into a desired output language. Note that the words are fed into the encoder one at a time, and the decoder generates the output sequentially. Okay, so we have seen the machine translation system with encoder and decoders, but both encoders and decoders are made up of several RNN blocks. Now, here is a RNN cell. It receives some input like a word or a character. It also receives some input from the previous steps. It will be zero vector if it is the first step. It processes these inputs through the network and then spits out a vector known as a hidden state. The model also feeds some of that information to the next step, which it can use it in the next step. Mathematically, it looks like this. If you look at the multiple steps of RNN cell, you can see it more clearly. At each step, the RNN passes along the information about its state to the next step in the sequence. And this ability to track information from previous steps is what makes RNN so powerful for making predictions based on the past data. RNNs played a crucial role in developing early machine translation systems, where the goal is to translate a sequence of words from one language to another. Let's now take the concrete example of translating English sentence "Transformers are great" to German "Transformers sind großartig" and see how RNN fits into the machine translation. Like you have already seen, we have encoder and decoder, each with 4 RNN cells. At step 0, RNN takes this input, which is a transformer, processes it and spits out a zeroth hidden state. At step 1, RNN takes the current input and the previous hidden state, processes it and produces the first hidden state, and then the process goes on. However, in this case, the context vector which is passed on to the decoder is only the last hidden state. At step 4, decoder processes the last hidden state and produces the first German word "transformer." And then the process repeats until the entire sentence is fully translated. Great! With this architecture, we can now translate from English to German. However, there are few problems with architecture and the training itself. Let's look at the problem with architecture now. The final hidden state of the encoder kind of acts as an information bottleneck. What do I mean by that? Well, the encoder has to compress the entire input sequence into one fixed representation. And this becomes particularly challenging with the long sequences, where the information from the beginning can get lost. Imagine you start a sentence, and by the time you finish the sentence, you don't remember how it started. And it's also proven that the deeper the RNN layer is, harder it is to train. We generally encounter problems such as exploding and vanishing gradients, etc. Luckily, there is a way to overcome this bottleneck, and it's called attention. Attention differs in two ways. First, encoder passes along a lot more information to the decoder. Passing along all the hidden state does eliminate the information bottleneck that we have discussed previously. However, this also overwhelms the decoder, as the decoder now has to process all the hidden states at each and every decoding step. In order to avoid this, decoder does something clever called attention. Decoder pays attention to those hidden states that are relevant at that particular decoding step. Now let's break down this step into several steps so that we can understand easily. Let's take the translation of the English word great to German großartig. Decoder looks at all the hidden state. Usually each hidden state is associated with a word, letter, or a punctuation, and give each of these hidden states a score, and multiply hidden scores with its softmax scores, basically amplifying the states with the higher scores and suppressing the states with the lower scores. Sum up these vectors to create a context vector for the sixth decoding step. Now let's zoom out and look at the big picture. RNN takes the embedding of the end token and an initial hidden state. The RNN processes in inputs, producing an output and a hidden state H4, and the output is discarded. And here comes the attention steps. We use the encoder hidden states and the H4 vector to calculate a context vector C4 for this time step. We concatenate H4 and C4 into one vector, and we pass this vector through a feed-forward neural network, and this network is jointly trained with the model. And the network produces the first translated word. And the process continues until the input sequence is fully translated. The main idea behind attention is that attention helps decoder focus on the most relevant parts of the input sentence at each moment. This is the key when it comes to translating or generating sequences, as it enables the model to learn complex alignments between the words in the input and the output sequences. For example, if you look at the English to French translation model, attention weights help the decoder to figure out that the English word area corresponds to the French word zone, even though they appear in the different orders in each language. By visualizing these attention weights, you can see how the model aligns words correctly across languages, making the translation process much more accurate. Let me quickly recap what we have learned so far. We have the encoder, which takes the input language and converts them to hidden states. And we have the decoder with fully connected layers, and in the front we have the attention head, which helps the decoder pay attention to relevant hidden states for that step. Although attention enabled much faster translations, there was still a major limitation when using recurrent neural networks for both encoder and decoder. Their computations are inherently sequential. This sequential nature means that you can't parallelize the process across the input sequence, which kind of slows down the training. Enter the transformer. Transformers differs in two ways. In the transformer architecture, both the encoder and the decoder have their own special kind of attention called self-attention, and their outputs are fed into feed-forward neural networks. We will get into details of self-attention later, but the basic idea is that the attention operates on all the states within the same layer of the neural network rather than just between the layers. And the second, get rid of the recurrence altogether. Self-attention makes transformer learn complex associations and no recurrence, allowing parallelizing so that we can train much faster on the GPUs, which has led to many of the recent breakthroughs in NLP. Great, now we have a basic idea of the transformer architecture. In the original transformer paper, the transformer model was trained from the scratch using a large data across various languages. However, in the real-world NLP applications, we often don't have access to such vast amounts of labeled text data for training. This is where the final piece of the puzzle comes in Transfer learning. Let's talk about transfer learning, which has become a common practice, especially in the computer vision field. In this field, it's routine to train a convolutional neural network on one task and then adapt or fine-tune it for a different task. For example, to identify planes, you can use pre-trained neural networks which are trained to identify cars. And this allows the network to transfer the knowledge it gained from the cars and to perform well on the aeroplanes. Architecturally, this process involves splitting the model into two parts, body and the head. The body is more general, feature extracting part, things like edges and colors, etc., which comes from the pre-trained network, while the head is a task specific, in our case, aeroplanes. During training, you initiate the body with the pre-trained weights and the head with the random weights, and train the whole network on its task-specific data. Compared to traditional supervised learning, this transfer learning approach typically results in high-quality models that can be trained much more efficiently, even with the less labeled data. Transfer learning had become a game changer in computer vision, but for a long time, it wasn't clear how to make it work effectively for NLP. That all changed in 2017 and 2018 thanks to ULMFiT. ULMFiT involves three main steps: pre-training, domain adaptation, fine-tuning. Let's now consider an example of sentiment analysis, and let's have a look of all three steps. First is pre-training. This step is very simple. It's called language modeling, predicting the next word based on the previous words. What's elegant about this approach is that it doesn't require labeled data. You can use readily available text from sources like Wikipedia and Google to train your model. In the domain adaptation, once the language model is pre-trained on a large-scale corpus data, the next step is to adapt it to your specific domain. For instance, you might start with the Wikipedia data and then adapt the model to the IMDb corpus of movie reviews. And this step still uses the language modeling, but now the model is predicting the next word within your target corpus. In the final step, the model is fine-tuned for the specific task that you care about, like classifying the sentiment of a movie review. A classification layer is added to the model and it is trained on your label data to optimize the performance on this specific task. ULMFiT essentially provided the missing piece that allowed transformer to take off in NLP. In 2018, two groundbreaking transformer architectures were introduced that combine the power of self-attention with transfer learning: GPT and BERT. GPT uses only the decoder part of the transformer architecture and follows the same language modeling approach that we've discussed so far, called ULMFiT. It was pre-trained on the book corpus, which consists of 7,000 unpublished books from the genre like adventure, fantasy, romance, etc. BERT, on the other hand, uses the encoder part of the transformer architecture and introduces a special form of language modeling called masked language modeling. In this approach, the model predicts randomly masked words in a sentence. The model predicts the most likely candidates for the masked words. BERT was pre-trained both on the book corpus and the English Wikipedia. In this section, I would like to discuss about LSTMs. LSTMs were the gold standard in NLP before the transformers came along. In fact, we can combine the transfer learning method ULMFiT with LSTM and can get quite far. We can even achieve a state-of-the-art model using LSTMs and ULMFiT. I cannot talk about NLP without discussing about LSTMs, and let's take a look. Simple RNNs can be quite good at forecasting time series or handling other kinds of sequences, but they do not perform well on the long time series or sequences. To train an RNN on long sequences, we must run it over many time steps, making the unrolled RNN a very deep network. Just like any other deep neural network, it may suffer from the various unstable gradient problems. And moreover, when an RNN processes a long sequence, it will gradually forget the first inputs in the sequence, making it impossible to remember the long sequences. To tackle this problem, various types of cells, such as LSTM cells with a long-term memory, have been introduced. The LSTM cells look exactly like RNN cell with current input x of t, previous state h of t minus 1, except that it has a new state called c. You can think of h of t as a short-term state and c of t as a long-term state. The key idea is that the network can learn what to store in the long-term state, what to throw away, and what to read from it. As the long-term state CT-1 traverses the network from left to right, you can see that it first goes through forget gate, dropping some memories, and then it adds some new memories via addition operation, which were selected by the input gate. The result C sub t is sent straight out, without any transformation. So at each step, some memories are added, some memories are dropped. Moreover, after the addition operation, the long-term state is copied and passed through tanh function, and then the result is filtered through the output gate. And this produces the short-term state h of t, which is also equal to the cell's output y of t at this time step. Now let's look at where the new memories come from and how the gates work. First, the current input vector x of t and the previous short-term state h of t minus 1 are fed to 4 different fully connected layers, and they all serve a different purposes. The main layer is the one that outputs g of t. It has the usual role of analyzing the current inputs x of t and the previous short-term state h of t minus 1, like in a basic RNN cell. But in a LSTM cell, this layer output does not go straight out. Instead, its most important parts are stored in a long-term state, and the rest is dropped. The forget gate, controlled by f of t, controls which part of the long-term state should be erased. And the input gate, controlled by the I of t, controls which part of the g of t should be added to the long-term state. Finally, the output gate, controlled by O of t, controls which part of the long-term state should be read and output at this time step to both h of t and y of t. In short, an LSTM cell can learn to recognize an important input, that's the role of the input gate, store it in the long-term state, preserve it for as long as it is needed, that's the role of the forget gate, and extract it whenever it is needed. And this explains why these cells have been amazingly successful at capturing the long-term patterns in the time series, long texts, audio recordings, and more. LSTMs have proven so successful that the basic RNN cells are not used anymore. Alright, we have seen the basic RNN cells, encoder-decoder framework, decoder with attention, transformer where both encoder and decoder has a self-attention head, and at the end, LSTMs. We have also looked at the groundbreaking transfer learning technique ULMFiT, which combined with transformers led to the great inventions like GPT and BERT. I think we have got a good foundation for upcoming lectures. But before I forget, some of the animations in this video is inspired by J. Alamar website on transformer. Check it out, it's cool. Link is in the description. Alright, that's it for this video. See you next time.